Please. I don't actually know how to end just the video. Look, we can just face it like this. But it is live now, so whatever you want. Yeah,
For the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So if you guys have ever met me on Matt, I've just moved here from Sydney since February, and we're very blessed to be part of this church. It's very nice, and it's good to be back on over Big City. I understand you guys are doing a series about relationships. I wish I didn't get asked to do a talk on this topic. But I also realised that we felt it appropriate to ask Megan how to find the right partner and me how to burn out. I don't know why. There must be some clear evidence that I've been expert on this topic. So, now there was also the photo that had some questions, and I looked through those questions to see if I could talk about them and realised that probably the best thing to do would be to, if I give us kind of feel at the beginning and then we have a good discussion. But discussion entails that you have to be put on those. If you're talking to myself, it's quite embarrassing. You find yourself turning off the live recording quite quickly. And the first thing to say is that I'm not an expert at this by any means. The very fact that I'm married and had kids is a miracle, and completely given by God. So I definitely don't have all the answers, but I think with the open discussion component of this talk, I think with us all, Meg is helping as well, we can kind of reason through some of the ideas. But one thing I did notice after listening to a few talks and doing some reading on my own and speaking to some of my old kind of Sunday school kids and things like that, is that probably we need to reset our thought process about this whole topic of relationships and this whole topic about marriage. Okay? And I think if we reset our thinking, then we essentially will reset the kind of our compass as to how we're going to think about each question. Okay? So the first thing that kind of came to mind for me is that we need to understand that every single thing God did in creation was for the purpose of revealing to us the heavenly. Everything. As in, you can see that God decided, look, I'm going to create the sun so that I can show them that the sun creates light and then the light is warmth. And everywhere else is cold and dark and miserable, and under the sun, it's light, just like it is for Jesus. You know, He creates, plants, He creates animals, He creates everything that has a beauty. And every single thing that He creates, He does it in a way so that we can see or have an insight into what heaven is like. Okay? Even the concept of creating plants that produce fruit. It's almost like He created it just so that in the Bible He could say, you must bear good fruit. If He didn't create plants with fruit, we'd be like, what are you talking about? What are fruit? Everything we have to understand that God did was for a reason, and for the reason of showing us, or giving us insight into the heaven. Okay? Even the fact that the way that He created us, male and female, that He created us to first be born as babies, that He had a clean slate. He didn't have to do anything. He could have created us in a way that the way we reproduce is like some other organisms, completely asexual. Maybe, if I get older, my fingers turn into 5 kids. He could have done it any way He wanted, right? He didn't have to do it in the way that He specified. But He did it exactly this way and as a prescribed way for a reason. And we have to know that that is for Him to show us an insight into the heavenly. Okay? To give us a chance to understand or have some insight into Christ, into heaven, into revealing His mysteries. Okay? And so we get an insight into this. Maggot rightly kind of brought you guys towards Ephesians chapter 5 last week. And I'll read it to you again. He says, so husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as the Lord does the church. For we are members of His body, and of His flesh, and of His bone. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but
I speak concerning Christ and the church. Now, when he says this, when St. Paul says this, it's almost like he has a realization. He's talking about marriage initially. He's just talking about marriage, telling people this is what's going to happen. You leave your mother and your father, and you combine to become one flesh. And he says this is a great mystery, and it's almost like a light bulb clicks, and he goes, "But I speak concerning Christ and the church." Very clear statement here that not only is everything else that God created to give us insight into Christ and heaven, but marriage is for the purpose of giving us insight into Christ and heaven, right? And Christ's relationship with us. And so it's not that marriage is its own entity. It has the sole purpose of reflecting Christ's relationship with the church. Our marriages are a symbol of what Christ has already established. Okay? So we know that he specifically made men, male and female. He specifically made the institute of marriage, and he specifically made the way that we reproduce. Okay, and he did all of those things prescribed so he could give us insight into heaven. Okay. Now, the other thing is when you look at how we reproduce. So, a man and a wife and has kids, and the kids grow from a young age. But you see a similar relationship between Christ and the church. Christ leaves his Father, to come down to earth. He's combined with the church. Okay, the two become one flesh. And what's the outcome? That we have new spirits in the church, new repentance in the church, new salvation in the church. Same kind of symbol. Okay, same kind of process. So when you elevate the relationship in marriage to represent Christ and the church, this gives you a new insight into how you think about all the issues surrounding relationships. That it has to be looked at in the light of remembering that this is a representation or a symbolization of Christ and the church, and it is heavenly. It is a mystery. It is not something that is for TV and for loud music, and this is for the angels. Okay, and we have to think about it in that kind of perspective, because when we think about it in that kind of perspective, it gives us answers to exactly how we should behave in every situation. Okay? Now, the other thing is, with that comes the concept of what is the purpose of the premarital relationship. Okay, which we all have to go through, which we're all, I don't know, when I was petrified of, where we all kind of don't know what to do. Everybody is reduced to kind of, uncertainty when it comes to that premarital relationship. But what is the purpose of the premarital relationship? How I see it is that it has two main roles. The first role is to determine whether or not the person sitting in front of you, or the partner that you've chosen so far, is selected by God. Okay? In light of the fact that this is going to be the person that you will emulate the relationship of Christ and the church. Okay? That's the first thing. And the second thing is to prepare for the marriage. That's emotionally, that's spiritually, probably financially as well, and socially. Okay? They're the two sole purposes of the premarital kind of relationship. Everything else is extra that maybe the world tells us about, probably makes those two aims more difficult to achieve. Okay, so one thing that does come up is what's the role of physical contact before marriage or in the premarital relationship? Now, when you look at it in the light of the fact that what is the marriage is to reveal the heavenly for us, the role of a premarital physical relationship, there is no role, literally none, right? And for those of us who are, able to do it, it would be better to have no premarital physical relationship. No. Okay. You might look at me and go, "Oh, this guy must be fresh off the boat. What's he talking about?" But it's true, right? Because what would it do? It would remove away from the two aims. One, if there's a premarital physical relationship, it's very hard to focus on building yourself spiritually, hearing God's voice to determine whether or not this is the person that he wants you to marry, praying together, learning about each other. It just makes all of that much more difficult. Okay? The other thing is it makes it much more difficult to develop emotionally, develop spiritually, and prepare for the marriage. So it holds no role. So then it kind of comes to this idea of what about burnout? Okay. Now, I didn't actually understand what this terminology of burnout was. Like, I thought maybe it possibly could be something that's more appropriately talked about in the actual marital relationship, but I presume you guys are talking about it in the premarital relationship. Now, two things which I think are key to understanding what could lead to this concept of burnout is, the first thing is being in a relationship and thinking or hoping that the partner that you've chosen or that the relationship you have will fill a void that you had before you had that relationship. That's a big fallacy. Okay. Most relationships that don't go anywhere, and this is kind of Amber Paula used to say, is when people try to replace or try to fill a void that can only be filled by God. Okay. An assumption that if I have a relationship with somebody or if this person is with me, then my life will all of a sudden be better. It's actually complete opposite. If there's a void in your life prior to meeting somebody and undergoing this process of a premarital relationship with the purpose of one day emulating Christ in the church, the chances are more so it will magnify the voids in your life and make the voids in your life more prominent and more destructive. So if there is a situation in a relationship where it may not be progressing, and obviously I'm making some sweeping statements here, but it's not across the board, but my thought is that we each have to think to ourselves, I need to be more prepared spiritually. I need to be have filled all my spiritual voids, have a strong relationship with God before I embark on this journey of meeting someone. Okay, now it doesn't mean have to be a pope or a bishop by the time you get married. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we know where our voids are in our spiritual life. We all do. We all know what we struggle with and whatnot. When we start to think that a relationship will fix that, that's a problem. It is not a solution to these issues. It's not a solution to these issues. Okay? It does not fill a void that only God will fill. Actually, C.S. Lewis, in one of the books I read a while back, said, there is a hole in my heart which is the exact shape and size of God. Okay? No one else will fill that void. Now, the other thing is, as far as the way that we undertake the premarital relationship, we should not be ashamed to allow God to be our matchmaker. Okay? And by extension of that, we should not be ashamed to allow Abuna into our the process of us meeting someone and guidance on the way. The truth is, there's no right way of meeting someone, and there's no right way of getting to that end point of marriage and having a good marriage. There's no right way. There's a truckload of wrong ways to do it, but there are plenty of right ways to do it, I think, as well. And you probably, if you ask Maggot in depth, or if you ask me in depth, our relationship probably went very different ways, but they both led to a reasonably good thing, I think. and so it's not that it has to go by a prescribed method, but certainly you need some guidance, and definitely some guidance sometimes out of the relationship is helpful, because when you meet someone, especially if it's a new process, if you've not ever had that process happen before, it's all new to you. You experience emotions that you're not used to. You experience thoughts that you're not used to. You're in a completely uncharted territory as to what you know. And so sometimes having someone who's impartial, does not have an emotional attachment, does not have is not in the depths of it, to give you some advice from the guidance of God, I would not turn that down, especially because the whole purpose of this is to later become married and emulate Christ in the church. And who better to help you do that than a priest, right? I think with that ahead of this, I think it's probably worth talking about these topics of burnout, but I want you to keep that orientation in your mind, okay? That everything that we do has to be with that ultimate aim. That the marriage is not just going to be a marriage. It's not just going to be that we're going to tie the knot at the altar and that's it. No, the ultimate aim is that your relationship and your marriage will emulate something heavenly. Okay? That's how we have to think about it when we answer these questions. So I assume the questions that were on Friday came up from you guys. Okay, so the other thing that I will say is that when I read the questions about burnout, I thought to myself, if we use this orientation that we've just established, I think for any of us, it would be very hard to allow the person that we're getting to know to experience this psychological agony of going or burnout, right? Because if the purpose of this is to get to know someone for the purpose of marriage and prepare for marriage, then the last thing you want to do is to have any kind of negative, outcome for someone in the process. So I'll add one more thing that I'm not sure how right this is or not, but we had a similar. I used to kind of serve in a youth meeting before, and at the time it was just a group of guys, but this could go both directions. And Aborna spoke to them about it, and one of the things he spoke to them about was that when you meet somebody, it's very important that you don't lead anybody on. You either take a step forward or you take a step back. This kind of limbo, chronic, flirtatious kind of agony is torture to some people, and it should never happen. And he went as far as to say, and I'd never heard anything like this, but he went as far as to say it's punishable by God. To do that to someone, to know that you're leading someone on and to continue to do it, is actually punishable by God. And the punishment is that in your own marriage, there'll be unrest. When you later on are married, there'll be unrest in your marriage. Okay? I don't know how true that is, but I understand that he was trying to get across the point that regardless of if you end up marrying the person who you're interacting with, you have a responsibility to take care of that person. For the guys, that's your sister. For the girls, that's your brother. You have a responsibility to take care of their psychological, spiritual, social stability. You cannot lead somebody on knowing that it's only helping you, not helping them, and continue to do it. And so, coming from somebody who was engaged for 4 years, the reason I was engaged for 4 years is because Joey was living in a different state. We didn't have the option. I would not ever suggest anyone that's asked me, I say you keep your engagement short. And the reason being is that it's not a marriage. Pre-marital relationship. It's the process of just determining if that's the right person and preparing for the marriage, and neither of those needs extended period of time. Okay? Especially if you're physically in close proximity. I was lucky Joanne was, living 2 hours away. So we got to know each other very well on the telephone because that's all the only way we could interact. And we'd see each other for maybe 1 or 2 days a year. That was it. So potentially you could say that a relationship that went for 4 years was actually the equivalent of somebody in 6 months or something. So, but I would really specify that because, again, using the orientation that we've discussed, the purpose is only to get to know that person, to decide whether or not you think they're from God, and then to prepare for the marriage. Neither of those needs exist. All right?
Sort of a question, or like, so just with that, I think, as long as during that pre-marital relationship, it's not a flirtatious state, as you call it, and it is for the purpose of working out, is this person suitable and preparing, then I think some people might take longer than others, and it depends on circumstances and depends on the person themselves. So I'm just sort of, but I feel like
No, I agree.
it could be interpreted that you're saying
Russian.
taking a long time is like sometimes it's not, it is for the right purposes, but it can take longer, and you can disagree on this.
No, I don't disagree. Look, I think firstly the first thing is to define the timeline. Like I think to myself, if we were in an engagement for a 4-year period together, I can't imagine that would have worked out in a very good way. The other thing is that one person may feel like, look, I need more time, and some people are very reasonable like that, very well thought out, very reasonable. It's not distracting in any other way. But does the other person feel the same way? Like having a sister, I know that if I'm not sure if this is for most girls, but a long period of time would be agony. To think maybe they have anything else. Do they not want to marry me? Have they changed their mind? Over a long period of time, they'll say, I know that I want to marry this person. Why don't they know yet? Maybe maybe they've met someone else. These thoughts are start to play. You've got to accept that, I'm not saying it's what always be, but the devil's around and would say, well, this is a good chance to break up something that could turn out to be a very holy marriage. So I'm not saying rush into anything. The last thing that any of us want, I listened to maybe I think everything in that was spot on. The last thing any of us want to do is rush into a marriage and then have not done the kind of necessity of deciding whether or not this is the person from God and preparing adequately. But by the flip side of it, there is a period of time when it's going too long. When you either take a step forward or you take a step back. But I would have thought that if after kind of 12 months you're still thinking I'm not sure, well, I mean that to me is an answer in itself. Right? That's how I know this is coming from an outsider who I'm not part of anyone's relationship, but I'm just saying that would have meant would be like, well, you probably should make a decision on that. Okay? And again, I don't think it's hard because the longer time goes on, and the more people will put their input into what their thoughts are, the more confusing it will get, the more emotionally involved it will become. It becomes, again, what did I say at the beginning? There is no right way to do it. There are definitely wrong ways to do it. There are no specified right ways. And so for somebody else prescribes another couple that may be right. I'm just saying as a generic thing, be mindful of the fact that you have two aims to achieve. Everything else is not part of the process. You have two aims to achieve. Prepare for marriage and determine if that person is the right person for you. That's it. If you dumb it down to that, it might make it a bit clearer. Something that's so chaotically difficult to kind of not make chaos, it may help to think about it just in those two ways. When you've achieved those two purposes, then there's no need to prolong any further. Right? But that also requires you to be very honest with yourself. Say someone is, this is the person that God chose from you. How do you determine that? When is the point when you say, and you're going to do this in the rest of your series before I check what else was the other topic. But to say to yourself, when is the time to say this is the right person for me? I think, you really have to feel that the premarital relationship is a time to become super spiritual, super holy, because that is the only way you're going to find out. That's the only way you're going to know. Be able to sit down every day and say to God, this is right for me. Allow the desire in my heart to continue to kind of become stronger and stronger. If it's wrong, remove the desire from me completely. I'm weak. I cannot make this decision on my own. I want to know that it's right for me. There's no answer. There's no allow God to be your matchmaker. There's no, why we have faith in every single thing, every single other thing that comes up. But when it comes to relationship, we're a bit uncertain. There's no reason. It's a time to really increase the amount of prayer, increase your time with your Bible, increase your time with your confession, Father, and allow God to speak to you. Because we know that God doesn't kind of yell at you about things. We know that God is whispering at you in the background. And so that's why I say to try to remove the clouding or the noise from the premarital kind of relationship, which definitely a lot of noise comes from the physical contact part, and allow God to speak to you. Allow your mind to be clear and focused on Him. And remember that the marriage, it's not that you're growing towards each other. The whole concept of the marriage is that God's in the middle and you're growing towards God. How could you experience burnout in that process? If your purpose is to grow towards God and her purpose is to grow towards God, and by virtue of that you grow towards each other, there is no getting sick of the person and I'm not sure, are you unsure about whether or not you want to grow towards God? But you'll know, you know. But it's hard, it's so confusing. And the problem is that when we do it, it's always the first time we've ever done it. It's not something that we practice for years and years. It's not like our exams. We do so many exams in our life, it's not the last one. It's easy. But the first time it was confusing. I remember when like some of us was just thinking, I have no idea what to do with this. I'm not sure. You go to a board next to you saying, he's right, but you don't want to hear that. But you ask your dad, this is the same thing. Okay. It's confusing and it is hard, but by the same token, it's incredibly hard to come up with a prescription for everyone to go, this is what you do. So, yeah. Now, with the thing about the parents, it's hard because one of the questions was like, what if there's burnout, but it's occurring because of people who are accessory to the relationship, not core to the relationship? And that's going to happen, especially like in our culture, that's going to happen. I have a method that I used. It may not work for anybody else, I don't know. But one of the kind of, my mum and dad, like their opinion is incredibly important to me. And so I had seen friends who had had relationships that become a bit chaotic because, you know, the mum doesn't like the girl or she doesn't do this. And that was very confusing. And so I said to myself, well, really, what do I need my parents to approve? I needed my parents to approve the person essentially on paper. I didn't need them to be absolutely in love with my partner's personality. I think that's for me. Right? I didn't like if they don't like, you know, the way she wears her hair or whatever. I didn't really think that was that important. I think that becomes too confusing. So actually, Joe doesn't know this, so she's probably going to know it now. But I sat with my dad and I said, look, this is the girl I've met on paper. Do you approve? He goes, what do you mean, Doctor? I've never met her. I said, I don't care if you meet her. This is who she is. Do you approve? He goes, this. I said, are you sure? He goes, this. So then we got to know each other. Thank God he loved her, right? But I thought, if he was like, oh, I don't like, you know, I don't know, like we come up with a whole bunch of things. You hear people fighting about, you know, I don't like the clothes they wear. I don't like the way that they, I don't know. Did you hear how they said that? You know, did you see how they responded to me? And, you know what I mean? We're especially like, you got to imagine that I know it's going to be like this with my kids. They're my kids. They're like everything to me. And someone else is going to come along who is so important to them. No, I'm important to you. And so, of course, I'm going to feel like, I don't know how I could like that person because they're replacing my role in my kids' lives. You know? And those parents can't help but do that. So that's actually a beautiful thing. Parents love their kids so much that they're protective of them. But by the same token, I think especially emotional Egyptian parents can be like, well, I don't really like that. They're not what I wanted. You know what I mean? So that was what my method was. Again, there's a number of right ways to do it, a number of wrong ways to do it. That worked for me, possibly because I got lucky and they all loved Joanne anyway. But yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, no, the parent thing can be tricky, but I think the best thing is to have good communication because a lot of times I find girls are a lot more observant and pay attention to little things.
Yeah.
So something will happen. Some will be like, did you see what just happened there? Like, did you see what your mum just did?
Yeah.
I'm like, I have no idea.
Exactly.
And she will tell me exactly what happened in detail. I'm waiting for the punchline. So what do you mean? But the point is, like, when you communicate it, this is maybe what they meant, or even that you may, like, because you might have to say to your parents, this kind of, I know where it's coming from, but, you know, it can be interpreted this way or that way. I think communication is really important because half the issues is like one person thinking this and then the other person thinking, well, I never did that, and you just don't meet sort of thing. So, yeah, a lot of them can get bigger than it needs to just because of that's what I think.
We have to go to that questions. Please. It can be generic. It doesn't have to be specific. It should be generic. Right, well, I'm going to start asking some questions if no one's going to ask questions.
Or you can have comments about what the accent or
you don't have to agree. Actually, I hope you don't.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were saying
Yeah.
can you clarify that? Because I feel like that was really hard. Because even if you're both aiming towards God, you're still gonna have disagreements and you're gonna have things you don't like, things you don't have in common. And then it's, you get to a stage where you want to decide whether it's something worth fighting for or not. And I feel like that will happen with everything is God.
Yeah, so the whole purpose of that kind of preamble at the beginning is like just to take a step back. It's a fallacy that once you get married, the disagreements go away. They probably amplify because there's so much more stuff you have to deal with together. So I don't think disagreements equals burnout by any means. My thought of it, maybe I've got the definition wrong, but my thought of burnout was that feeling that I'm not sure if this doesn't feel right anymore. It's not feeling nice. I'm hurt by this person, but I still love them. I still wish that I could continue on. That's what I thought when of burnout. I mean, if it's a matter of disagreements, yeah, that's part and parcel. I mean, we all know that your spiritual life will go up and down, but as long as it's heading in a positive trajectory, you're in the right direction. It's always going to go up and down. So there are going to be days where you're not as good as you were the day before. But that's not the same. That's not the same thing. Like having a disagreement, especially when you're trying to organise a wedding and all that. Which case do you want? Like there are going to be disagreements. There's no two ways about it. But when I think about burnout, I think about that stagnant state that the relationship gets into, where you're sad. You're sad and you don't want to let go because what if they are the right person? That's the doubt that comes to people's minds. Or what if they are the right person? It's me, right? Then it goes on for longer and longer and longer.
What burnout means like this is what I thought when I heard burnout.
Yeah.
You get exhausted out of this agreements and all the misunderstandings to the point that you are numb. Basically, that's what I felt.
It can be not just disagreements, but it can be like you can be in a relationship where it's just emotionally draining. Like
Yeah.
you just feel like this is taking so much, even if there's no disagreement. Like the person that you're in a relationship with, you just feel like it's too much work.
Yeah.
That it's
What kind of
actually
things lead to that?
draining you.
What kind of things lead to that? Think about the kind of topics that would lead to that.
Like what you said about details, about like stuff that makes the other person, not happy with you, and you don't even know it, and it gets to a point where you just burn out. But it could be a lot of things, but I think one of them is a lot of disagreements that you end up feeling more miserable or more unhappy than you are feeling happy. And I think personally, if a relationship at the beginning gets to that point, I think it's time to end it, because in general relationships gets more difficult. So and at the beginning of a relationship, it should be the easiest or the happiest time when you're connecting with this person. So if it's at the beginning already difficult, in my opinion, I think you should just leave it. But that's my opinion. Yeah.
Because on the same token, I don't necessarily think it has to be. I think that's wrong.
Well, difficult, I guess you would mean that you're feeling sad more times than you're actually feeling happy in the relationship. So if you feel more miserable in the relationship than you were before, that's not a good indicator for it, in my opinion.
I think if you break down or make people upset, or make people sad in a premarital relationship, I think a big contribution to that is the fact that there is uncertainty, right? Because remember, regardless of what conversation you have, at the end of it, there's still the topic of, so are we still here? That goes away. Once you're married, that doesn't exist anymore, right? So the way you argue is much more definitive. It's much more like, well, what's the solution? Because we're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. So, possibly if we had this argument 6 months ago before we got married, it's going to turn out very bad. But we're here to stay, so let's work it out. In the kind of premarital relationship, it's like an argument that gets really bad always has that never-ending point that it could just mean that you break up, right? And so I don't think necessarily that in a relationship before you're married it's meant to be easy and always agreeable. And nor would you want your kind of potential partner to always agree with you so that it is like that. That's not right either. I mean, I think if it's too hunky-dory, there's this question about what's going on, then you're really not getting to the core of getting to know each other. But by the same token, if there's no light at the end of the tunnel, if you feel that he's pulling you away from the spiritual life, you feel that I have had friends in those situations where I know that they could not pray the way that they were. They couldn't pray. There's no way they could sit down and pray the way that I'm feeling, angry and upset and whatever, a whole bunch of mixture of emotions. There's no way they were sitting down to read their own Bible. There's no way. Like, that's a big red flag as far as I'm concerned. Because like I said, if you break it down, what is the purpose of that premarital relationship? Is it the right person? And preparing to get married. You can't do either of those if you're not communicating with God. And if this thing is making a barrier for you to be able to communicate with God, it fundamentally hasn't got what it needs to lead to marriage. That's a very hard thing to think. Because, the truth is, it's not only when you're married that you start to create that permanent connection with a person. This is one of the things that brought me to that comment of not letting it go too long. Okay? It's not true to think that you can be in a relationship and not give part of yourself, spiritually, socially, emotionally. It's not true, right? And so it's about finding that balance where spend enough time to know definitively that this is a good thing, right? But you've not spent too much time where it's become stagnant, hurtful, and damaging. That's really hard. Like Megan said, it could be a short period of time. It could be 3 to 6 months. It could be something that happens over a year, 2 years. I don't know. It can vary, right? But I think that's why I really think that an external person like a priest will give you some input, who's able to pray for you, who's able to see things from a non-emotionally involved perspective. Is really, because especially when it gets as crazy as what you're saying, I don't think anybody thinks straight. There's just too much emotion in the room for anybody to think straight. And then you throw a cunt in there who's yelling as well. That's a couple of things. Nobody's going to be thinking about anything logically after that point. You know what I mean? But again, I don't have a prescription. I don't have an answer for exactly when's the right time. But by the same token, I think when I say, do you know if this is the right person for you? It's not a defined time. It's not something that happens, like as in a specific thing happens, like there's a sign that falls out of the sky, goes, that's the one. But by the same token, you will never, I hate to say this, you got stuck in the same thing in your talk, but you will never know 100%. Like you can never live out the whole marriage before you're married. You can't. But the truth is, when you get married, you deal with things. Like you work things out. Like there are going to be things that you don't 100% agree with, or you don't click with, or whatever. There will be. There has to be. If there's not, there's something wrong with your marriage. But you will never experience every single one of those scenarios before you're married, right? But you do get a feel for, well, this is the person who I want to just work that kind of stuff out with one day. This is the person that I want to persist with every drama that comes up, with every situation that comes up. You know, the one thing that was really, that kind of gave me some insight into this, I have a friend because I was here in 2017 for a year working here, and I had a good friend who is my age, and his wife is Joanne's age, and they have young kids, right? And sad thing that she got diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she passed away at a very young age. And I was sitting, when this all happened, I said to myself, you know what? If that scenario took place, I would much rather God with me, right? And leave Joanne. And then I realized that I think that she's the most important thing in our house. And then I realized that Christ thinks we're the most important thing in his house. Because that's what our relationship is, right? Our marriage, the way that I feel towards my wife, is how Christ feels about us. Okay? But do Joanne and I agree about everything? God knows. Definitely not. Right? But we don't need to. We don't have to. That's not a prerequisite for getting married. Okay? Because of the fact that she's the most important thing in our house, we will work out everything. Look, there's no two ways about it. We'll work out everything. Everything. You know what I mean? And so that's the point you need to discover. Is this the person I'm going to persist with for everything? I'm not going to, there's no exit. I don't want an exit. You know, I want to give up my exit. I just want to be with this person to go through thick and thin, to, you know, if God allows it, you know, raise kids, go through every, you know, world difficulty that can come up, but I still want to persist with it. Everything be fine as long as I can do it. That's the kind of, like, yeah. The problem is that, like, you know, when we talk to our parents and they go, oh yeah, I met my wife in one day and I got married the next day and look how well it worked out. Right? I think a big component of that is that there is no option. Right? You know, there's no option after that to fail. So they worked things out and they grew together and became compatible. I'm not saying that's what we should do by any means, but I'm saying it does show you that there is the pendulum swung the other way. They were relying on the fact that they had resolved to continue the relationship and to compromise and to really emulate Christ and church. Christ is not turning away from us because we're a pain, or we're disobedient, or we're obnoxious, or we're arrogant, or we're rude, all the things that we are. He never turns his face away from us. True, right? There's never a time where you can not go back to Christ. He will always accept you. He will always love you. I mean, the marital relationship is the same. So that generation may be one component, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, one component may be that they had the resolve. And then we've gone the other way where, which I agree with to a degree, that we want to make sure of things before we take the plunge into a marriage. But with that, somewhere along the line, we may have lost the resolve to compromise and to think that when we look at a person, we don't go, well, you know, that person is going to be my wife. I have to take care of them. I have to love them. I have to submit to them. I have to exalt them in my house. Like I have to make them special in my house. We've lost that. We're like, oh, he didn't do the laundry. Oh. Well, he didn't clean up after. He didn't put the toilet seat down. You know, like we've lost that, right? The resolve is being lost. So there needs to be somewhere in between, which is the balance, where we're thorough about, you know, doing our kind of due diligence of, yep, is this the right person? Do they have the fundamentals to, you know, help us towards heaven, help us emulate Christ in the church? But by the same token, we also have to have the resolve that we're going to, once we make the decision, this is the person.
Yeah, another question. I was able to know, like you mentioned at the beginning, they need to be ready emotionally, spiritually, financially. So what would you define as something?
No, like I mean, look, the financial thing is up. I don't know. I had nothing to do with marriage. Look, I think spiritual we know. You know, look, one thing we compare it to is, you know, when you approach a really big set of exams where you're certain you're not going to do very well, your spiritual life just spiral. Like you're floating. I feel like it's the same. So I had a set of exams before my last set of exams ever, petrified. I was literally petrified. Joanne said that was the first time I ever seen me cry. I was petrified, honestly. I could, like, had no control, petrified, right? But my spiritual life was powerful. You know, like it was, I remember being in an exam and thinking that the examiner was surely was going to fail me. He made it very clear. And I remember thinking, you can't fail me. It's not up to you. Like, that's how I was. I thought, you know what? I've never read such a state in my life again. But I think it's aiming for that, like that result where it's such an important decision. Use that to fuel your spiritual life. You know? But it's really important that I pray, you know, every day because this is going to decide whether or not I should. Well, it's really important that I'm serving, and I'm serving as much as possible because that's going to clarify in my mind that God is standing next to me and that He's going to help me make this right decision. You know, that I can't tell you what's going to happen. I haven't been technically going that's the one, but I think you know when there's really pivotal life events, which God clearly puts in our lives to revamp our spiritual life. And sometimes they're bad life events. Right? Sometimes they're events where someone might be sick or struggling, or you see suffering or whatnot. That revamps your spiritual life. I think you need marriage needs to be the same thing. This is why I wanted to kind of reorientate how we see marriage. Like, because some of the topics that we're discussing, I'm looking at it in like a worldly light. You're about to take part in a mystery. You're about to take part in a heavenly relationship, in something that God has designed for you so that you can have insight to heaven. When you put it in that perspective, like, your focus is very different. It's not about, oh, they said that to my mum, and you know, like it's about the spiritual direction. I don't have an answer for what, like, how will you know 100%? I don't think anybody. They'd be doing very well. And actually, like every time you see these books that say how to find the right partner and all that, no, it's all garbage. Like nobody knows. Like, there's no one right way to do it because God hasn't said that your relationship is going to be the same as everyone else's. Nor did He say your partner is going to be the same as everyone else's. These are two individuals that are special to God, that are, you know, sent together to emulate Christ in the church. So I think, like, with the burnout thing, it sounds to me like once you use the term burnout, it seems to me that it's quite close to being over, like you said. Right? But again, I don't know if we're all on the same page with the definition of that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think another reason for burnout could be compromising.
Yep.
So when you find yourself compromising a lot, and yes, because you want it to work,
yeah.
But then every time you kind of gaya على نفسك in every way, because you're happy, you're in a relationship with this person, or you really want it to work, you come to a point where you've just given so much that you feel like you haven't taken anything back, and that can be emotionally draining. Of course, but as well, having a relationship with Rabbina, that can restore some of the emotional drainage. But it takes so much from
the person psychologically, emotionally, also spiritually. Like you said, if you're feeling down, like you won't be able to pray.
Yeah.
So you feel like it's taking so much from you that you're not even able to give that person anything else.
Yeah.
You feel burned out.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is again, probably not the right way to think about it. Because again, when you think of it from the real you're not in a relationship to take something out. Like you're not in a relationship to, it's not, to get what I can get out of it. That's not the point, right? But by the same token, if you're feeling that you can't carry on any further because it's too hurtful, it doesn't sound like it's, that maybe God's way of telling you that it's not the right thing for you, or that it's, and I'm not sure I'm not sure, again, like I don't have a set answer, I'll definitely don't, there's no quote, but it doesn't seem that would be the type of relationship that would then end up in something that emulates Christ in the church. I think. Please speak up if you.
I believe that like in your relationship, you have to be building it up in some way. If it's not building up, then instead it's draining you from taking your spiritual life or spiritual or emotional life. If it's not adding to you, I think it's not working. But if it's adding to you, if it's building you up, I think that's a good relationship.
Depends how it's building.
Yeah, of course.
So like if it's building you up financially, I think the only way that it needs to be building up is spiritual. I honestly think that. Because I don't think that if it's building you up spiritually, then it won't be contributing to you emotionally, to you socially, and possibly to your financial anyway. You know? Yeah. Yes.
When you say like building up spiritually, like you surely want to two people kind of on the same level. So someone might be higher than the other, so that someone would be lifting the other person up. Does that mean they're not spiritually ready to be in a relationship just because you feel like person?
Look, I don't think if that was the case, that the person who was feeling spiritually higher would technically acknowledge the fact that they're spiritually higher than someone else. Possibly they would think that they're spiritually lower than the other person. So, no, I don't know how to measure who's more spiritual relationship, but I think. Look, I mean, I think if both parties are growing spiritually because of each other, then that's where I would live. Like, I mean, blessed would you be if you meet a partner that can lift you spiritually. That's excellent. That's what you want. That's the aim. That's the aim.
I heard actually like a, I'm not prepared for when I talk about this. I heard a priest say, he gave a really nice analogy. He said like, it's like a guy that goes to the gym and he bench presses like 100 pounds. And then this other guy goes to the gym with him and he bench presses 20 pounds. But both of them like push themselves to the maximum reps and like till they can't, whatever. That's very different from a third guy who comes and just sits there taking photos and getting an energy drink and doesn't actually lift anything. So the guy that's only benching 20, he's still doing his absolute maximum. And he's still pushing to his limits. So I really like that. What I was saying, like, it's about like it's about your orientation or how hard you work rather than the amount if you like.
But also, like your spiritual life has multiple aspects to it. But like it may be that one person is much more tuned to prayer, and the other person is much more tuned to service, and one person is much more tuned to being kind of accommodating or understanding when people around them are feeling not good, whereas the other person may be much more generous. I mean, there's so many parts of your relationship. I'll say this for sure. Like there's so many times where I overlook things. I'll overlook things. Maybe we should remember that. No idea that was a thing, but that's the thing where you compliment each other. And I really doubt that one person. Like if one person in the party is thinking that guy's so much more spiritual than me, or that girl's so much more spiritual than me, that's a good thing. But I suspect the other person's probably thinking the same thing. If they are really that spiritual. And that's a really beautiful thing. Honestly, that's not something to be afraid of. Like it's not a competition. Absolutely, you're moving to the same goal together. You're both moving towards Christ. Whatever moves you towards Christ quicker and more strongly, you like accept it and embrace it. That's a blessing. That's God telling you. If you have that thought about your partner, that person is so close to Christ, what more sign do you need? Like, right?
I just want to say one thing about that. I think it's important that you learn self-will because, like, you were linked, I don't know, like 23 years or whatever, by yourself and doing certain things, and then you another person who's lived a completely different life. So it might be really hard at this time, you might have to be unlucky, you might make you might get really upset at the start, or you'll be like, and then you end it, and it was for the wrong reasons. I think it's very important that you don't just at the start think it's going to be this time, that's what it's going to be, because you might have two completely different people. So I think it's important to give it time and see how that develops, because oftentimes you feel like this person will bring out a lot of motives and you that never knew existed. And once you both experience it together, it tends to quick turn into something good. So not necessarily has to be very good at the start.
I would say you have to have at least a very similar direction in life. Like, for example, if you're someone spiritual, you like reading the Bible and praying and serving in the church, and the other person, all their concern is, for example, is to have a happy family or a happy relationship or happy life. This is their main concern in life. This is their number one direction. Then you have two different directions. So if you can judge that and you can say, okay, so for example, just like I was speaking about how someone is bench pressing as best as he can. So if you're working toward God, they work toward God to the best of their ability, and that's what all you care about. You're going in the same direction, also you're not spiritually on the same level as you or whatever. I think that's okay, but if they have a different direction, you, for example, they want a life of going, always catching up with friends and parties and stuff, and you have a life of service. I think that's going different directions is going to bring a lot of clash and friction. So,
but isn't that before you get into something, you balance, you see that stuff before?
yeah, of course.
So, but then you won't reach the burnout, or like you won't.
Actually, a lot of things you don't see until you get into it.
I get what you mean, yeah.
Like a lot of things you think that it would work out completely differently until you actually get into it. Like, okay, I did not see all these things would happen. So, of course, if you see it from the beginning, from the outside, there's no reason to step in. But if you step in, and then you discover things that you never know.
Sometimes you want to particularly be in a relationship with someone that you know for years, might be someone that you've met and you've taken an interest in, want to explore that relationship. You're not going to have that kind of like 4, 5, 6 or whatever years beforehand. So there's always going to be the issues that arise at the start. As much as it's going to be, yes, on a relationship, something new, something exciting, there's always going to be the issues as well.
Possibly, like you guys heard last week, you may have some things that are non-negotiable in your kind of decision tree. Right? You know, like you may say, I definitely want them to be Christian. I think that's it's not negotiable, isn't it? But you may say, great to know if they're serving, or great to know that they're. I don't know. You'll have things in your non-negotiable list, right? If you find these things out very early on, and I think that's a really, if you know that previously you couldn't negotiate on those things, and you had in your mind and your resolve that these are really important things that I wouldn't be happy overlooking, then you would establish that quite quickly. I would have thought. I wouldn't think you'd need years to burn out to get to that decision of the right one. It's not the right person. I mean, you possibly need to be a bit more honest with yourself early on in the process and say, again, this is a sweeping kind of generalization, may not apply to all settings, but I think that's not indifferent. Like what Megan had said and what I'd said, in that you have an idea of what you kind of think is what you would be unhappy to negotiate on paper. If they don't fit that, then possibly don't go down the track of exploring it, because I can only see how that could end up in hurt. Maybe you start to like the person, but you still aren't willing to negotiate. But that kind of end well. And also, effectively, that's kind of leading that person on, because they were never in the running, really.
I've heard priests say that these non-negotiable criteria should be
mean, the very fact is, like, I definitely from non kind of church people, like, I know of friends who would embark in relationships which I knew they would never be happy with. They had said that they would never happy. But you embark in it, then you wonder months down the track when you're emotionally involved, why is this so hard? I mean, if you meet anybody, you'll find good in them. Like, people are good. Like, there are, we're not saying that somebody who you choose not to take on as your life partner is a bad person. It's not. I'm sure there's great things about them. Probably lots of things that you admire. But they're still just, you've decided they're not the person you're going to embark on. And then now you have to let go of your emotional attachment to the things that you love about them, that you like about them. So, yeah, I think absolutely in that situation, that's a kind of black and white thing. To not proceed down that path, because that can only end in birth for both people. But there are, I think when we're talking about burnout, we're not saying that there are profound things that we can't accept. And now we're at the stage of what do we do? I think we're talking about two people who, for all intents and purposes on paper, would seem like they would be a good fit. But there are intricacies that are clicking, like personality clashes that are clicking, or, how one person deals with one person's family and things like this that you would not know unless you take the time to get to know the person.
And that comes back to your original what you were saying before. There's going to be issues that arise. It's working through a burnout is a form of an entirely different thing, which has been described by so many people here. It's when you're emotionally drained, you don't want to have that interaction with them. It's a chore to actually speak with them.
I feel like if you put that relationship in front of your priest, your confession father, you tell them how you're genuinely feeling. I'm miserable. I'm sad. I feel hurt. I feel unhappy. I can't pray. What would the priest's response be? It doesn't seem like this is from God by any means. Like, I think if we're getting to this point of burnout, and I hope I've got this definition of burnout right, it seems that really like that. This is why a external party who is kind of speaking, to heavenly mysteries to is important, because when you're emotionally involved, you can't make a straight decision. You can't. The same. Okay, so I do operations, right? We're not allowed to operate on our kids. Why? I'm very good at what I do. I operate on everyone else's kids. Why can't I operate on my kids? I can't make a clear decision. Like, I would not be able to make a clear decision. Doesn't mean I'm bad at what I do. It doesn't mean I'm bad at making decisions. Doesn't mean I'm, not an impartial or a reasonable person. It means in that setting, I cannot make the right decision. So I have to have it removed from my my kind of decision, my circle. So it's the same thing. You may be a very reasonable people. Like, we see a lot of people who are incredibly reasonable people, incredibly well thought out, anecdotal, able to really, think in a logical fashion. You put them in a relationship where there's emotions flying and possibly love and all this, and the ability to make a clear decision to go down. Yeah. So, like, I think, and I think with that, it's not just, I focus on the kind of the priest idea because not always across the board are the parents as calm in the situation. But one thing that one of my good friends had told me that I thought was really wise is, as he kind of started to approach the age where he was going to, be on the hunt, he was very open with his parents. He sat with them a lot and talked to them about it. Like, instead of when mum goes, no, he wouldn't shut it down. What did you think? Tell me about what you were. Because, and it worked quite well, because when he met somebody, I said, Mum, I found her. The one that you asked me to find, I found her. Not this one. No, but like, you're involving them in the process. Sometimes it takes a bit of tact like that. But one of the big things that I think throws parents off is one day, daddy's little princess or daddy's boy is there. The next day, all they can think of is he or she's going to leave my house in the next 6 months. How can I deal with this separation? Yeah, that would be. And then all the soap operas come out. And so, absolutely, you need to be, have that relationship with your parents. Talk about it. Tell me about how you and mum met. Tell me, it gives you ammunition later. It's quite good. So, tell me what did you say to mum when you met mum? What did you say? What did you think of dad when you met dad? Explore so they can remind themselves of what it was like. And talk to them, be very open, because I've got to be honest, like, the concept of, like, at the time, and I think to myself, meeting somebody and going behind their parents' back initially Like, I do think there is a period of time where you just need a few moments to get to know each other before you involve 100 people. But it feels a bit dodgy, right? Like, you know that that's the most important person to those parents. That's the most important person. You know they would step in front of a car for that person. And now there's something happening. There's going to be a life-changing event that they have no clue about. It's a hard thing to manage. I'm not saying across the board that we involve parents on day one or anything like that. I'm not. I'm just saying keep in mind how hard it is for parents. This is coming from a parent, right? Like, very hard thing. Like, now I have a daughter. I didn't understand when I had two boys. I'm like, do whatever you want with them. So now I have a daughter. Like, I know that I will be gutted if I'm not involved in that process. I'll feel so betrayed if someone, and she's only one, so thank God she'll be in the nunnery by 2, and it'll be set. It'll be fine. Like, keep that in mind, you know, like keep that in mind. The other thing I was going to say, something that I think works really well is if you take the orientation which we've set today, I think there's no role for mind games in it, right? You know, the whole be mean, keep them keen. What did I hear one say? One girl said to one of her, spit on him, they're like a stamp and they'll stick. So I think the truth is, if you meet somebody, you have an honest intention of, like I said, getting to know them, and if they're the right person preparing for marriage, but having a conversation that, look, there's going to be no mind games to this. I have no desire to have you in agony waiting for my call. Here's the roster. I'm calling you on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Be next to your phone. I'm calling you. Right? Don't wait for a call. You know that's agonizing. I don't want, like, any friends that I've had that are girls who I see them go through this. It's agonizing, and for the guys now, it's even agonizing. It used to just be the girls, but now it's unnecessary. Get rid of all that clouded rubbish and realize that what are you trying to work out? Is this the right person? Let's prepare for marriage if you're the right person. Get rid of as much of the smoke from it as possible. I'll call you Wednesday night. Person's relaxed. I'm not what you get in message. A message 2 hours ago. You know, that's agonizing. There's no need to put anybody through that suffering. And when you realize it's not the right person, move back. In a group setting, no kind of chronic flirting. Feels good for one person, but it feels horrible for the other person. The uncertainty is torture. It's not, you don't do that to somebody who's your sister in Christ or your brother in Christ. You don't do that. And I mean, like, that's how it happens outside. It's not how it is. It's not how it is. Whenever there's a scenario where only one party is to gain out of that behaviour, then it's wrong. It's not from God. It's not the right thing to do. Yeah. Maggie, do you want to add anything? I'm sweating. I want to get out of here. Again, like, this isn't the prescription. Just my thoughts on it. Regard it if it's not, you know, of any help, take the parts that you think are. But, you know, try to, the way it says, go back to your Bible and try to reorientate and use that orientation as your kind of glasses when you're looking at the topics and you're looking at your issues or the situations you're going through. But just realize as well that you can't control it all. The only kind of thing that's going to help you is God. So, you know, you can't control it and think you have all the answers. I used to laugh with my mates with what you do. When they start like that, you know they've got no idea. Does anyone have anything else to add? Questions, comments?